My property manager phoned about my power bill. I'm on the road 20 days a month. Okay, picture this. You come home after being away for weeks, exhausted, just wanting to fall into your own bed, only to find out someone hasn't just broken into your house, they've moved in. They're living your life, sleeping in your bed, drinking your beer, and running an entire criminal enterprise out of your property. Can you even imagine that level of audacious betrayal? My name is Derek, and for years, my life was pretty simple. I'm a long-haul trucker out of Calgary, 41, divorced a few years back. My two-bedroom bungalow in Bridgeland? It was my sanctuary, my escape from the highway. I'm on the road about 20 days a month, hauling freight across Alberta and BC. It's good money, and honestly, the solitude suited me. My ex, Jennifer, used to joke I was married to the road, and she wasn't wrong. After the divorce, I figured living alone was perfect for my lifestyle, no one to worry about, just me and the open road. That was my reality for 2.5 peaceful years. Until October 17th. I was 3 days into a run to Vancouver when my phone rang. It was Charlotte Reed, the property manager for my neighborhood. We barely spoke, usually about snow removal or the annual homeowner meeting.
Derek, hi.
Sorry to bother you while you're working, she said. Her voice had that specific tone, apologetic, but serious, that instantly put me on edge. I was at a truck stop outside Golden, fueling up, and my hand instinctively tightened on the nozzle. What's going on? I asked. Well, she continued, I received a notice from NMX about your property. Your electricity usage has spiked dramatically in the past 2 months. We're talking triple your normal consumption. I frowned, watching the fuel numbers climb. That doesn't make sense, Charlotte. I'm barely home. That's what I thought, she replied, and then dropped the bombshell. And there's something else. One of your neighbors, Mrs. Patterson, mentioned seeing someone at your house on multiple occasions. A man, she said. She assumed it was a friend you'd given a key to while you were away. My blood ran cold. My hand was practically crushing the fuel nozzle now. I haven't given anyone a key, I snapped. There shouldn't be anybody there. There was a heavy pause on her end. Derek, she finally said, I think you might want to come home and check on things. I finished that delivery run faster than I'd ever done before. What should have taken 2 more days, I compressed into 1. I drove like a man possessed, barely sleeping, my mind racing through every terrifying possibility. Had I been robbed? Was someone squatting in my house? The thought of a stranger in my home, touching my things, sleeping in my bed, it made my skin absolutely crawl. I got back to Calgary at 11 p.m. on October 19th. But I didn't go straight home. I parked my rig at the depot and took my personal car, a Honda CR-V I kept there for situations exactly like this. I drove slowly through my neighborhood, every nerve ending screaming. When I reached my street, I killed the headlights and coasted to a stop 3 houses down. Everything looked normal. My porch light was on a timer, just like I'd left it. But then, as I watched, my heart stopped. A light flicked on in my living room. A few seconds later, the kitchen light. Someone was definitely in there. I sat there frozen for maybe 10 minutes. At 11:47 p.m., I saw movement through the front window. A figure, clearly male, walked past. He was in a white t-shirt, holding what looked like a beer bottle. My beer, I thought, a bitter taste in my mouth, from my fridge. Every instinct screamed at me to storm in there, to confront whoever this was. But Charlotte's words echoed in my head. This had been going on for 2 months. This wasn't some random smash and grab. This was organized, deliberate. And if I went in there without knowing what I was dealing with, things could go very, very wrong. I forced myself to drive away. I checked into a Holiday Inn near the airport, spent the night staring at the ceiling, planning my next move. The next morning, I did what I should have done immediately. I called the police non-emergency line. Constable Andrews was sympathetic, but cautious. Mr. Morrison, we can send someone to check it out, he said. But honestly, if there's no sign of forced entry, if someone has a key and claims permission to be there, it often becomes a civil matter. We see it with bad roommate situations, family disputes. I live alone, I said, my voice tight. I didn't give anyone permission. I understand, sir. But what I'm saying is, it helps your case significantly if you can document what's happening. Security cameras if possible. A record of unauthorized entry. Then we can build a clear case. I thanked him and hung up, frustrated but understanding. He was right. I needed evidence. I spent the morning at Best Buy, buying 3 wireless security cameras and a doorbell camera, the kind that records to the cloud. Even if they found them, they couldn't destroy the footage. I also got a cheap tablet to monitor the feeds remotely. That afternoon, while I was certain the intruder would be gone, I went back to my house. I parked a block away and approached on foot, watching carefully. The place seemed empty. I let myself in through the back door, moving quietly, even though I was in my own home. The violation hit me immediately. Dishes in the sink that weren't mine. A coffee mug I'd never seen. The living room showed subtle signs of use. Couch cushions rearranged. An empty beer can on the coffee table.
Not just any beer.
My beer, from the case I'd left in the garage fridge. I walked through my house in a daze. Someone had been living here. Really living here. The bathroom had an extra toothbrush, different towels. In my office, the spare bedroom, the desk had been moved, papers shuffled. And then I checked my bedroom. Someone had been sleeping in my bed. I could see the impression in the mattress, the way the blankets were pulled back on one side. There was a book on the nightstand that wasn't mine, some thriller novel with a bookmark halfway through. I felt physically sick. This stranger hadn't just broken in. He'd made himself at home. He'd been living my life in my absence. I set up the cameras meticulously. One in the living room, disguised behind books with a clear view. One in the kitchen, tucked above the cabinets. One in the hallway, to catch anyone moving between rooms. And the doorbell camera. I didn't clean up, didn't move things back. I wanted him to think everything was normal. Then I left, locking up, and drove back to the hotel. The cameras were motion activated. I set up the app on my tablet and waited. I didn't have to wait long. At 4:17 p.m., my phone buzzed with a doorbell notification. I opened the app and watched. A man in his mid-30s, wearing a Canada Goose jacket, gym bag slung over his shoulder, walked up to my front door. White, about 5 feet 10 inches, short brown hair, neat beard. He looked completely normal, like any guy you'd see at a Tim Hortons. He pulled out a key, my key, and let himself in. I watched, horrified, as he moved through my house like he owned it. Kitchen first, fridge, beer. Gym bag tossed on my couch. He turned on my TV, flipped through channels. I recorded everything. Over the next 3 days, I documented his routine. He arrived every afternoon between 4 and 5. He'd work out in my basement, using my weight bench.
Cook dinner in
my kitchen with my groceries. Watch TV. Around 10 or 11 p.m., he'd go to sleep in my guest room, not my master bedroom, which I found oddly considerate in a completely insane way. But then things got really interesting. On the 3rd day, October 23rd, someone else showed up. At 6:32 p.m., my doorbell camera caught a woman approaching. Early 40s, blonde ponytail, athletic build. She knocked, which surprised me since the man had a key. Through the interior camera, I watched him answer. They clearly knew each other. They hugged, talked for a moment, and then she came in, carrying a large purse and a laptop bag. They sat at my dining room table, and this is where my jaw dropped. She pulled out the laptop and papers, and they started going through documents. I couldn't see everything clearly, but I saw enough. They were reviewing papers, pointing at the screen, having what looked like a business meeting in my house.
I took screenshots of everything.
I zoomed in as much as the camera quality allowed. On one document, I could make out a header. It looked like a rental agreement. A rental agreement. That's when it clicked. I pulled out my own laptop and started searching. Airbnb first. I typed in my address. And there it was. My house, listed as Cozy Calgary Bungalow, perfect for extended stays. The photos were of my home, my living room, my kitchen, my backyard. The description talked about a quiet residential neighborhood, all the comforts of home. The nightly rate was $215. There were 7 reviews, all 5 stars, dating back 6 weeks. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. This wasn't just someone squatting. This was organized fraud. Someone was running an illegal rental operation out of my home while I was on the road. I scrolled through the reviews, my hands shaking. Great place, very clean. Host was accommodating with late check-in. Felt just like home.
Host.
They were calling this man, this criminal, the host of my property. I kept watching the cameras. The woman stayed for about 2 hours. I managed to get a clear shot of one document they were reviewing, and I could make out a name at the top, Brian Casti. I immediately started searching. Brian Casti, Calgary. It didn't take long. Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram. I found him. According to his profiles, he was a freelance property manager. His LinkedIn said he specialized in short-term rental management and property optimization. The woman was harder to identify, but I caught a break when they said goodbye. The camera picked up their conversation. Thanks again, Melissa. I think we're good for the next few bookings, Brian said. No problem, she replied. Just remember, we need to be out by the 15th when the owner comes back. The 15th? That was when I'd originally told my dispatcher I'd be back. They had no idea I was already here, watching. I spent the rest of that evening researching. Melissa turned out to be Melissa Vance, a graphic designer who also did marketing consulting. She was the one handling the Airbnb listing, the photos, the descriptions, the digital face of this entire operation. But something still bothered me. How did Brian get a key? How did he know I'd be gone? How did he know my schedule? I went back through my security footage, every single moment I'd captured. And then I noticed something. On the second day of surveillance, Brian had a visitor around lunchtime. An older man, maybe 60, wearing a jacket with a logo I couldn't quite make out. I enhanced the screenshot as much as possible. The logo looked like a wrench and a house. I searched Calgary Property Maintenance wrench logo and found it. Mountain Peak Property Services. My property management company. The company I paid to check on my house when I was away. The company that had a spare key. The company that had my complete schedule because I always notified them when I'd be gone for extended periods. I called Charlotte Reed again. Charlotte, does Mountain Peak Property Services work with any of the properties you manage? Mountain Peak?
Sure.
They're one of the contractors we use. Why? Do they have access to homeowner information like schedules, contact information? There was a pause. Derek, what's going on? I told her everything. The illegal rental, Brian Casti, the connection to Mountain Peak. Oh my God, she breathed. Derek, you need to report this right now. I am, I said, but I need more evidence. Can you check if any other homeowners in the neighborhood have complained about unusual activity or high utility bills? She promised to look into it. Meanwhile, I kept watching. Over the next week, I documented everything. I captured footage of 3 different Airbnb guests staying at my house. I recorded Brian meeting with Melissa twice more. I got clear images of the Mountain Peak employee, who turned out to be Gerald Hawthorne, according to his employee badge, which I managed to capture on the doorbell camera. But the breakthrough came on October 29th. I was monitoring the feed when Brian and Melissa had another meeting. This time, their conversation was clearly audible through the camera microphone. Gerald's getting nervous, Melissa said. He thinks the Morrison guy is going to figure it out. Brian scoffed. He won't. He's a trucker. He's never home. We've been doing this for almost 3 months, and he hasn't noticed. But what about the utility spike? What if he gets suspicious? So what if he does? We've made over $18,000 off this property alone. Even if we have to shut it down, we've got 4 other houses in the rotation. 4 other houses. My blood went cold again, but this time, it was mixed with a surge of fury. This wasn't just about me. This was a criminal operation targeting multiple properties. Melissa pulled out her phone. I'm worried about the one on Ratcliffe Drive. The owner's only gone 2 weeks a month. That's cutting it close. We'll be fine, Brian said confidently. Gerald's been careful about choosing properties. All the owners are out of town frequently. All the spare keys are easily accessible through Mountain Peak. It's foolproof. I had it all on recording. The next morning, November 1st, I walked into the Calgary Police Service District Office with my tablet, my laptop, and a folder full of printed screenshots and documentation. The detective assigned to my case was Rebecca Wu, a sharp woman in her late 30s who listened to my story with increasing concern. "Mr. Morrison, you've done excellent work documenting this," she said after reviewing my evidence. "This is clearly organized fraud, breaking and entering, theft of services, and potentially identity theft, depending on how they're representing ownership of your property." "There are at least 4 other properties involved," I told her. "They mentioned them on camera." Detective Wu nodded. "We'll need to investigate those. Do you know the addresses?" "One is on Ratcliffe Drive. I don't know the others." "We'll work with your property management company to identify potential targets. If this Gerald Hawthorne had access to multiple properties through his employment, we can narrow it down." Over the next 2 weeks, Detective Wu and her team built their case. They identified the 4 other properties, all owned by people who traveled frequently for work. They interviewed Gerald Hawthorne, who broke almost immediately and provided detailed information about the operation. It turned out Brian had approached him 6 months earlier with a scheme. Gerald would identify suitable properties, provide keys and schedules, and get 20% of the profits. They'd made over $73,000 in total. The sting operation happened on November 14th. Police waited until Brian and Melissa were both at my property, meeting with an Airbnb guest who was checking in for a 3-day stay. When they knocked on the door, the look on Brian's face was something I'll never forget. I was there, standing behind the officers, watching as they arrested him and Melissa. The Airbnb guest, a young woman from Toronto visiting for a conference, was mortified when she learned the truth. She hadn't known. None of the guests had. They'd all booked through the platform, paid money, and thought they were staying in a legitimate rental. Brian Casti was charged with breaking and entering, fraud over $5,000, theft, and conspiracy to commit fraud. Melissa Vance faced similar charges for her role in managing the listings and collecting payments. Gerald Hawthorne was charged with breach of trust and conspiracy. The trial took place the following spring. I had to testify, showing the hours of security footage I'd collected. The prosecutor used my documentation as the backbone of the case. Brian's lawyer tried to argue that since there was no forced entry and the guests were legitimate renters, the charges were overblown. The judge wasn't sympathetic. In the end, Brian got 2 years in provincial jail and 5 years probation. Melissa got 18 months. Gerald, who cooperated fully, got a suspended sentence and probation. All 3 were ordered to pay restitution, split among the 5 property owners who'd been victimized. My share of the restitution was just over $14,000, which roughly covered the sky-high utility bills, the cost of changing all my locks, the security system, and the crushing violation of knowing strangers had been living in my home. But money wasn't really the point. The point was that I'd trusted the system. I'd hired a property management company specifically to keep my home safe while I was working, and someone within that system had betrayed that trust, had sold access to my private space for profit. I sold the house 6 months later. I couldn't live there anymore. Every time I walked through those rooms, I saw Brian sitting on my couch, drinking my beer, sleeping in my guest room. I saw Melissa at my dining room table, calculating profits from my property. I saw Gerald Hawthorne handing over my key like I didn't matter, like my home didn't matter. I bought a condo instead, one in a secured building with 24/7 security. I installed cameras everywhere. I check the feeds multiple times a day, even when I'm just gone for a few hours. My ex-wife, Jennifer, called me after she heard about what happened. "Derek, that's horrible. Are you okay?" I told her I was fine. I'm not sure that was entirely true. Some violations you can't really measure in dollars and cents. Someone took my sanctuary, my private space, and turned it into a commodity. They sold access to my life, my belongings, my bed. They made it into a business transaction while I was out working to pay for it all. The other 4 homeowners went through similar experiences. One woman, Amanda Cheong, told me she found reviews of her house online talking about the comfortable master bedroom and the well-stocked kitchen. Strangers had been raiding her home, her personal space, like it was a hotel. Another victim, Marcus Thompson, discovered that someone had gone through his personal documents while staying there. His identity information had been compromised. He spent months dealing with fraudulent credit card applications. The ripple effects of this kind of crime go beyond the initial violation. You lose your sense of security. You question everything. Every time something seems off, you wonder if someone's been in your space again. Mountain Peak Property Services went out of business within 3 months of the arrests. The owners claimed they had no knowledge of Gerald's activities, but the damage to their reputation was catastrophic. None of us believed they were completely ignorant. How does an employee have that kind of access without oversight? There were civil lawsuits, too. All 5 homeowners sued Mountain Peak. We settled out of court for undisclosed amounts, but it was enough to feel like some justice had been served on that front as well. I learned a lot from this experience. Things I wish I'd known before happened. First, if you travel frequently, don't just trust that your property is secure. Install cameras, even if you trust your property management company. Trust but verify. Those cameras were the only reason I had enough evidence to prosecute. Second, monitor your utilities closely. That spike in electricity usage was the first red flag, but I didn't see it until Charlotte brought it to my attention. If I'd been paying closer attention, I might have caught this months earlier. Third, build relationships with your neighbors. Mrs. Patterson, the neighbor who noticed someone at my house, was trying to look out for me. If I'd known her better, if I'd told her explicitly that no one should be there when I'm gone, she might have called me directly instead of just mentioning it casually to Charlotte. Fourth, don't give spare keys to companies without doing thorough background checks. And even then, consider alternatives. Smart locks with temporary codes that you can control remotely. Secure lock boxes with rotating combinations. Anything that gives you more control and less blind trust. Fifth, check if your property is listed on rental platforms. Just search your address on Airbnb, VRBO, and similar sites. It seems obvious now, but it never occurred to me that someone would be bold enough to list my property without my knowledge. They were counting on that assumption. Finally, if something feels wrong, act on it immediately. Don't wait. Don't rationalize it away. I was lucky that I came home when I did, that I followed my instincts to investigate before confronting anyone. If I'd waited longer, who knows how much worse it could have gotten. The psychological impact of this kind of crime is something people don't talk about enough. It's not like a break-in where someone smashes a window, steals your TV, and leaves. This was methodical, sustained, personal. They didn't just steal from me, they borrowed my life. I still drive long haul. I still spend weeks on the road. But now I check my cameras obsessively. I have alerts set for every door, every window, every motion sensor. My neighbors have my number and explicit instructions to call me if they see anything unusual. I've probably gone overboard with security, but I don't care. You only get violated like this once before you become paranoid. On the 1-year anniversary of discovering the illegal rental, I drove past my old house. There were new owners, a young family with 2 kids. I saw a bike in the driveway and a small garden growing in the front yard. It looked happy, lived in, loved. I hope they never experience what I did. I hope they never have to wonder who's been in their home when they're away. I hope their trust in people and systems isn't shattered the way mine was. But I also hope they're careful, because the world has people like Brian Casti and Melissa Vance and Gerald Hawthorne in it. People who see your property, your privacy, your sanctuary as nothing more than an opportunity for profit. People who will take advantage of trust, of absence, of the little gaps in security we all have. My father used to say that home is where you feel safest. For a long time after this, I didn't feel safe anywhere. It's taken therapy, time, and a lot of work to rebuild that sense of security. I'm getting there, slowly. The cameras help. The secured building helps. But mostly what helps is knowing that I took action. I didn't let them get away with it. I documented everything. I reported it properly, and I saw it through to prosecution. I took back my power in the only way I could. If you travel for work or own property you're not in frequently, please learn from my experience. Don't assume your home is safe just because you hired someone to watch over it. Don't assume that a locked door is enough. Don't assume that people won't have the audacity to move into your space and profit from it. They will, and they do, more often than you'd think. Protect yourself. Protect your space. And if you discover something like this happening to you, don't confront the situation alone. Get evidence. Call the police. Build a case. Let the system work the way it's supposed to. Because at the end of the day, your home isn't just a building or an investment. It's your sanctuary. It's where you should feel safe, secure, and private. Don't let anyone take that from you. And if they do, fight like hell to get it back. What would you have done if you found strangers living in your home, especially if they had a key? Have you ever had a situation where your sense of security was completely shattered? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I'm really interested to hear them. ***.